Amara's laughter carried through the narrow streets of her small African town, a sound as light as the morning breeze. She was 16, but her eyes held the wisdom of someone who had known both love and loss. Her mother, Mama Ijeoma, had raised her alone after her father's death, pouring every ounce of strength into her daughter's education. "You will be the doctor this town has never seen," she would often say, pride softening the wrinkles of her weary face. Amara believed her. She dreamed of white coats, shining stethoscopes, and saving lives beneath the mango tree where she studied each evening. School was her sanctuary, a place of laughter, ambition, and whispered gossip. Then one term a new boy arrived. His name was Tund, tall, handsome, with a smile that seemed carved to win hearts. The teachers admired his intelligence. The girls whispered his name like a secret prayer. But it was Amara who caught his attention. Maybe it was her quiet confidence, or the way her laughter seemed to heal the dull air of the classroom. Their friendship began like any other, helping each other with assignments, staying late after class to review biology, exchanging jokes about strict teachers. At first, Amara thought little of it. Tund was kind, respectful, and seemed genuinely interested in her dreams. He often asked about her late father, about her mother's struggles, about her desire to become a doctor. His voice carried warmth, the kind that melts the walls one doesn't even realize are there. Soon their meetings became daily. They shared roasted corn under the old baobab tree, exchanged notes with doodles, and sometimes walked home together when the sun dipped behind the hills. The town began to notice, but Amara brushed it off. "We're just friends," she would say, her cheeks flushing pink. Mama Ijeoma watched quietly. She trusted her daughter but feared the world that often punished innocence. "Books before boys," she'd warn gently, to which Amara would laugh and promise she understood. Yet there was a stirring inside her, a curiosity she couldn't name. Tund's gaze lingered a little too long sometimes, his compliments a little too soft, his presence too comforting to ignore. He made her feel seen, not just as the bright student or the daughter of a struggling widow, but as a girl learning the fragile beauty of being desired. One evening, while studying together after school, the rain came suddenly, trapping them in the empty classroom. They laughed at first, trying to shout over the thunder. But when the lightning flickered, something in the air changed. Tund looked at her in a way that made her heart race and her breath falter. Amara, innocent and trusting, didn't understand the danger of such closeness. The sound of rain drowned her thoughts, and the line between friendship and something else began to blur. She didn't know that this moment, this fragile intersection of innocence and temptation, would alter her life forever. That night, she lay in bed, confused by the fluttering in her chest and the guilt she couldn't explain. Outside, the rain washed the earth clean, but inside her, a storm had just begun, quiet, invisible, yet destined to change everything. Tund's words came like poetry, soft, deliberate, and full of the kind of dreams Amara had never dared to speak aloud. "You're different, Amara," he would say, his voice steady beneath the whispering leaves behind the school field. "Not like the others who chase shadows. You're the light itself." Those words sank deep into her heart, planting something warm and dangerous. No one had ever spoken to her that way, not her classmates, not the teachers who admired her grades, not even the neighbors who praised her mother's strength. Tund made her feel seen, cherished, chosen. Their friendship slowly turned into something unspoken yet powerful. They met after classes more often now, sometimes pretending to study, sometimes simply sitting in silence, watching the sunset spill gold across the schoolyard. He would talk about his dreams, of leaving their small town, of studying engineering in the city, of buying a house with wide windows where they could see the stars. "You'll be a doctor," he'd say, brushing his fingers against hers, "and I'll build a clinic for you." Amara would laugh shyly, her cheeks warm. "You talk as if the future is already written." "It is," he replied. "Ours is." Each word wrapped around her heart like a promise she didn't know she needed. The world around them faded when he spoke. The noise of gossiping classmates, the warnings of her mother, even the quiet fear that love could ruin the careful path she'd built. She began to live for those moments. The secret notes he slipped into her bag, the late walks home under violet skies, the sound of his laughter mingling with hers. Then came the night that would bind them in ways neither understood. It was after a school event, the moon swollen and bright. The field behind the classrooms was empty, save for the rustle of crickets and the cool night wind brushing the grass. They sat close, speaking in whispers about their dreams again. "When we finish school," Tund said, "we'll leave this place. I'll take you to Lagos. You'll wear white coats and I'll wait for you after work. We'll have our own home. No one will ever look down on you again." His words filled her eyes with stars. Amara's heart beat so fast it drowned out her thoughts. "You mean it?" she asked, barely breathing. "I swear," he said, his fingers brushing her cheek. "You're my only one, Amara. You always will be." She believed him. In that moment, she wanted nothing more than to hold on to that feeling. The certainty that someone had chosen her, that love could be as beautiful as she'd imagined in stories. The moonlight fell softly on their faces, and the night folded around them like a secret. Against her better judgment, against the voice of her mother in her mind, Amara let herself fall. The boundary between innocence and longing dissolved, replaced by warmth, by trembling hands and whispered vows. It wasn't lust that guided her, it was faith, faith in the boy who promised her forever. Later, as she walked home, the stars above looked different, brighter, somehow closer. She pressed her hand to her chest, feeling the echo of his heartbeat still there. "He loves me," she whispered to herself, smiling. But somewhere deep within the earth, where promises sink when broken, the night wind carried a warning. Love, when unguarded, could be the most dangerous dream of all. And though Amara didn't yet know it, her world had begun to tilt, quietly, irreversibly, toward heartbreak. The morning sun that once filled Amara's room with warmth now felt heavy and cruel. 4 days, her body had betrayed her, waves of nausea, trembling hands, dizzy spells that made even the walk to school unbearable. At first, she told herself it was stress or a passing illness. She had exams coming up, perhaps it was just exhaustion. But deep down, an unspoken dread began to grow, like a shadow creeping closer each day. Then came the missed days, first one, then two, then more. She stopped marking her calendar. Her heart thudded in her chest every time her mother asked if she'd eaten, every time she saw children playing near the well. Her laughter had vanished, replaced by silence and sleepless nights. She began collecting herbs from the old women in the market, those said to balance a woman's body. She didn't ask too many questions and they didn't pry. They simply gave her what she asked for, their eyes full of quiet understanding. Each time she boiled the herbs in secret, she prayed, "Please, let this all be a mistake. Let everything go back to normal." But nothing changed. Her body kept reminding her in small, undeniable ways. Her uniform felt tighter. Her face, once bright with youth, seemed pale and drawn. Her reflection no longer looked like the girl she remembered, it looked like someone burdened with a truth too heavy to carry. Then one evening, as the sky darkened and thunder rolled in the distance, her mother found the small bundle of herbs hidden beneath Amara's bed. The silence that followed was deafening. "Amara?" Her mother's voice trembled as she held the herbs up. "What is this?" Amara froze, her throat dry. The words she'd rehearsed 100 times scattered like frightened birds. "It's just for headaches, Mama." Her mother's eyes narrowed. "Don't lie to me, child. These herbs are not for headaches." Tears blurred Amara's vision. "Please, Mama." The older woman dropped the herbs onto the floor, her hands shaking. "Tell me it's not true. Tell me you haven't brought shame upon us." Amara couldn't speak. Her silence was the confession. Her mother's knees gave way as she sank onto the stool, her voice breaking. "Who?" "Tund," Amara whispered, barely audible. The name fell like a curse between them. Her mother covered her face with both hands and wept, not just for her daughter's innocence lost, but for the cruel certainty of what would come next. In a town as small as theirs, secrets never stayed hidden for long. And indeed they didn't. By morning the whispers had begun, soft at first, then spreading like wildfire. "The doctor's girl is carrying a schoolboy, they say. Such shame, such disgrace." The market women whispered behind baskets of fruit. The schoolchildren stared. The elders shook their heads in disappointment. Amara could feel the stares burn through her like fire as she walked to school. Once, her laughter had filled the corridors. Now, even her footsteps felt heavy. Teachers looked at her with pity. Her friends kept their distance, afraid of being tainted by her story. Tund avoided her eyes entirely. The same boy who once promised her forever now passed her in silence, his friends snickering behind him. Each time she saw him laugh with someone else, a piece of her heart crumbled. At night, Amara would sit by the window watching the stars she used to wish upon. "What will happen to me, Mama?" she whispered one night, her voice trembling. Her mother sat beside her, her face lined with worry and grief. "You will live, child," she said softly. "Even if the world turns its back, you will live." Amara nodded, but inside she wasn't sure she believed her. Outside, the rain began to fall, slow, heavy drops against the roof, like the sky itself weeping. And somewhere in the darkness, the same wind that once carried Tund's sweet promises now carried whispers of betrayal. Amara didn't yet know it, but this was only the beginning. The storm had only just started, and when it passed, nothing in her world would ever be the same again. When her mother finally gathered the strength to confront Tund, the boy stood beneath the mango tree outside the school, his hands in his pockets, his expression flat. The same lips that once whispered promises now twisted into a smirk of disbelief. "Me?" he said, laughing softly as if the question itself was absurd. "Madam, I think you've been misinformed." Amara's confused. Her mother's eyes widened in disbelief. "Confused? She carries your child and you dare." Tund shook his head and took a step back, pretending to look hurt. "I don't know what she's told you, but she's lying. Ask anyone. She's been desperate for attention. Always hanging around, always talking about love. Maybe she wishes it were me." The words sliced through the air like knives. Amara stood behind her mother, trembling, her palms clenched so tightly her nails cut into her skin. She had imagined many outcomes: fear, regret, even apology, but not this. Not this cold denial. "Tund," she whispered, tears streaking her cheeks. "You said you loved me." He didn't even look at her. "I said what you wanted to hear. Don't twist things." The laughter that followed wasn't from him. It came from the small crowd of students who had gathered nearby, drawn by curiosity and gossip. Whispered words slithered between them like snakes. "She trapped him." "She's crazy." "Did you hear what she did?" The sound of it broke something inside Amara. She turned and ran before anyone could see her fall apart. By the next day, the rumors had hardened into truth. Every corner she turned, someone was whispering. Boys snickered, girls looked at her with pity or disgust. Even her teachers, once so proud of her brilliance, now called her name in class with cold detachment. When she raised her hand to answer, they pretended not to see it. At home, the silence was heavier. Her mother had stopped speaking much, moving through their small house like a ghost. The once warm laughter that filled their evenings was gone, replaced by the sound of quiet sobs behind closed doors. One night, Amara heard her mother praying, her voice cracking. "God, what sin did I commit to deserve this? My daughter was my pride. Now the world spits on her name." Amara wanted to step forward, to hold her mother and say she was sorry, but shame chained her to her bed. Days passed and the ridicule deepened. Someone wrote her name on the school wall with cruel words beside it. Another placed torn pieces of a baby doll on her desk. Laughter filled the air as she sat frozen, staring at the pieces. When she tried to confront Tund again, he simply smiled and said, "You should have known better, Amara. You're not the kind of girl anyone believes." That night, Amara stood by the riverbank, the moonlight reflecting off the water like silver tears. She thought of how her laughter used to echo through the town, how people used to greet her with warmth. Now they turned away as if she carried a curse. She whispered into the wind, "You said we'd face the world together. Why did you leave me to face it alone?" No answer came, only the soft rustle of the reeds and the distant cry of a night bird. The next morning she returned home with swollen eyes and trembling lips. Her mother looked at her for a long time, then sighed deeply and said, "My daughter, I cannot protect you from their tongues. But don't let their words define who you are. One day truth will rise like the sun, and the shadows will burn away." Amara nodded silently, but her heart was already scarred. She no longer looked toward the school with hope. The girl who once dreamed of becoming a doctor now walked with her head lowered, her laughter buried beneath the weight of betrayal. In the corners of the town, people still whispered, but among those whispers, a new one began to form, quiet and uncertain. If the boy lied, then what will happen when the truth comes for him? And though Amara didn't yet know it, truth was already stirring, patient, waiting, like a storm gathering beyond the hills. The letter came folded in half, its edges smudged with the principal's heavy ink stamp. Amara's mother opened it with shaking hands while her daughter stood nearby, clutching the edge of the table. The words were few but sharp as blades. Due to moral misconduct and the potential negative influence on other students, Amara Nwoko is hereby expelled from Olanroa School effective immediately. Her mother read it twice before her voice broke. "They've thrown you away like you're nothing." Amara's heart sank, but she said nothing. She had already seen it coming. The way teachers avoided her gaze, the whispers that followed her footsteps through the corridors, the way her name had become a warning among parents. The next day she went to collect her few belongings: a notebook filled with neat handwriting, a pen her mother had bought her on her 15th birthday, and her biology textbook, the one that had sparked her dream of becoming a doctor. She held it tightly, her reflection trembling in the classroom window. Outside, a group of students stood near the gate, whispering, "There she is." I heard she tried to trap him. No wonder the principal had to make an example. Their words stung, but what hurt most was seeing Tund among them, smiling, his uniform crisp, untouched by consequence. He laughed when one of his friends nudged him as if the months they'd shared meant nothing. The principal refused to meet her mother's eyes. "We cannot have her around the other girls," he said stiffly. "This kind of behavior spreads. I hope you understand." Her mother's voice was bitter. "I understand that you punished my daughter for being a victim." But he was already walking away. As they left the school gates for the last time, Amara felt as if the sun itself had dimmed. Her mother's hand on her shoulder was the only thing keeping her from breaking completely. Back in their neighborhood, the whispers began before they even reached the house. The tailor across the street stopped sewing and stared. Two women at the well leaned close to murmur. Children paused their play to watch. "Poor woman. Did you hear? Her daughter was expelled. She should have raised her better." Each word struck like a stone. Amara stopped going outside altogether. The laughter of her old friends had turned into distant echoes. The market, once her favorite place, now felt like a court of judgment. She spent her days sitting by the window watching life move on without her. Her books gathered dust on the small wooden table by her bed. Sometimes she'd open them and trace the lines of her handwriting, remembering who she used to be, the girl who dreamed of hospitals and healing, who wanted to make her mother proud. But dreams don't breathe well under shame. One evening, her mother found her staring blankly out the window. "You must eat something," she said gently. Amara shook her head. "They've taken everything from me, Mama. My school. My friends. My name." Her mother knelt beside her and took her hands. "They've taken your peace, not your soul. The same people who point fingers will one day beg for forgiveness." Amara wanted to believe her. But every whisper outside said otherwise. At night, she lay awake listening to the world, the barking dogs, the wind against the roof, the distant hum of voices that always seemed to carry her name. Her heart felt heavy, her chest tight with unspoken grief. The girl who once carried sunlight in her laughter now lived in shadows, unseen, unheard, her dreams buried beneath the cruel weight of other people's judgment. And still, somewhere deep inside, a faint ember of defiance burned, fragile but alive, waiting for the moment when silence would no longer be her cage. "You said." The night the storm came, the sky over the small town cracked open with fury. Thunder rolled like drums of war, and lightning painted the sky in jagged, blinding flashes. Inside a tiny mud-walled hut, Amara clutched her belly, beads of sweat clinging to her trembling body. Her cries were swallowed by the sound of the rain beating against the roof, yet every sob carried a lifetime of pain. Her mother, Igioma, stood outside, drenched in rain and prayer. Her lips moved ceaselessly, whispering to ancestors, to God, to anyone who would listen. "Please spare my child, she is only a girl." The wind howled back as if in answer, bending the trees outside and sending leaves spiraling like frightened birds. Inside, Amara gasped, gripping an old woven mat beneath her. The walls seemed to close in as another wave of pain ripped through her. She screamed, a sound that could have split the sky. "Mama," she cried, her voice hoarse, her breath ragged. Igioma rushed in, her soaked wrapper clinging to her frail frame. "Breathe, my daughter," she said, kneeling beside her. "You are strong. You will not die tonight." But Amara's strength had been fading for months. The humiliation, the whispers, the constant stares had drained her spirit. Now, as her body strained to bring life into the world, she felt more alone than she ever had. Another contraction hit, sharp and merciless. She arched her back, nails digging into the mat. Igioma held her hand tightly, whispering, "Push, Amara, push. Don't give up." Thunder roared again, shaking the hut. In that moment, it felt as if nature itself bore witness, the storm mourning for a child forced to grow too soon. Amara pushed, tears streaming down her face, her cries merging with the storm's wild rhythm. Hours passed like lifetimes. The candle burned low, shadows dancing across the walls. The small space smelled of earth, sweat, and fear. Amara's voice grew weaker, her breath shorter. "Mama, I can't," she whispered, her words barely forming. "You can," Igioma said firmly, though her voice trembled. "For him. For you." Then came a cry, not from Amara this time, but from a tiny, fragile voice that pierced the storm. It was the cry of new life. Igioma's hands trembled as she lifted the baby boy, slick and crying, his skin glowing faintly in the flickering candlelight. Amara's eyes fluttered open. She looked at the child, her child, and something within her cracked open. She reached out weakly, her fingers brushing the baby's cheek. The moment she touched him, she broke into sobs, the kind that come from deep, raw places where pain and love collide. He's beautiful, she whispered. Ijeoma wrapped the baby in an old cloth, pressing him to Amara's chest. He has your eyes, she said softly. Bright, just like the morning after rain. Outside the storm began to ease. The thunder softened to distant murmurs and the rain became a lullaby. But inside the hut, the silence that followed was heavy. Amara looked down at her son, so small, so perfect, so innocent of the cruelty that had brought him here. Will they hate him too? She asked, her voice fragile. Ijeoma looked away, her eyes wet. They will talk, Amara. They always do. But this child, he is not shame. He is light. And one day that light will burn so bright the world will be forced to see it. Amara smiled faintly, though exhaustion pulled her eyes closed. She kissed her baby's forehead, whispering, Your name will be Chaik, the one who brings strength. As she drifted into sleep, the candle flickered, casting golden light on the mother, the daughter, and the new life between them. The storm had passed, but its echoes lingered, in the puddles outside, in the trembling leaves, and in the quiet heartbeat of the child born from both love and sorrow. In the stillness, Ijeoma sat watching them, her hand on Amara's hair, her gaze fixed on the baby's face. A soft smile touched her lips as she whispered a prayer of gratitude. May the rain that witnessed your birth wash away the past, she said, and may tomorrow rise gentler for you both. And as dawn began to break through the gray clouds, the first light touched the hut. The storm had ended, but a new story had just begun. 2 years had passed since the stormy night when Amara brought life into the world. The town had changed little. The same dusty roads, the same laughter of children echoing through the evening air, and the same whispers that still followed her shadow. But Amara had changed entirely. She no longer walked with her head bowed. Each morning she tied her wrapper firmly, carried her son on her back, and walked to the market where she sold herbs and handmade soap. Her hands, once soft from writing and study, were now strong, the hands of a mother who had rebuilt herself from ashes. Chaik, her son, was now a bright-eyed 2-year-old who followed her everywhere. He laughed easily, asked endless questions, and carried an energy that filled the small hut with light. To Amara he was not a burden. He was her redemption, her proof that something pure could grow from something broken. Then one afternoon, as the sun dipped low and painted the horizon in gold, a familiar figure appeared at the edge of the marketplace. Tund. He was thinner now, the sharp confidence that once defined his stride replaced with hesitation. His clothes were worn, his eyes dimmed by shame. The news had spread quickly. His father's business had collapsed, the family forced to leave the city and return to the village they once looked down upon. Amara froze when she saw him. The air seemed to still. For a heartbeat, she was 16 again, the girl who believed his promises under the moonlight. Then she blinked and the memory dissolved. Tund approached slowly, removing his cap as he neared her stall. Amara? He said softly, almost uncertain if he had the right to speak her name. She didn't answer. Her hands continued arranging the soaps, her movements steady but her jaw tight. He swallowed hard. You look different. I had to, she replied simply, not meeting his eyes. Silence stretched between them, heavy and uncomfortable. Then a small voice broke it. Mama, who is that man? Chaik asked, tugging at her wrapper. Tund turned sharply and froze. The boy's face was his own reflection from years ago, the same sharp chin, the same curious eyes. It was like looking at a living truth. Amara finally looked up, her gaze steady. This is your father? She said quietly. Tund's lips parted, but no words came. Guilt hit him like a wave, knocking the breath from his chest. He knelt down slowly, tears pricking at his eyes. Chaik, he whispered. But the boy only looked at him curiously, then turned to his mother. Mama, why is he crying? Amara's voice softened. Because sometimes people only understand the truth when it's too late. Tund bowed his head, shame washing over him. Amara, I was a coward, he said, voice breaking. I was scared, of my parents, of the gossip, of everything. But not a day has gone by that I haven't thought of you, or him. Amara studied him for a long moment. The boy she once loved was gone. Before her stood a man broken by his own choices. I don't hate you, Tund, she said finally. But I don't need you either. Chaik has me. He has my mother. He has peace. And I will not let your guilt disturb that. Her calmness cut deeper than anger ever could. Tund nodded slowly, tears streaming down his face. You're stronger than I ever was, he said. Amara turned back to her stall, her voice quiet but firm. No, Tund. I just learned that strength isn't in words, It's in surviving when everyone expects you to break. As Tund walked away, the setting sun bathed her and her son in warm light. Chike tugged at her hand again. Mama, will he come back? She smiled faintly, brushing his hair. Maybe. But we don't wait for what's gone, my son. We grow. And as the evening breeze carried the scent of rain, Amara stood tall, no longer the girl who had been shamed, but a woman who had learned to rise, even when the world tried to bury her. Tund began showing up quietly, first at the edge of the market, then near Amara's hut. He brought food, small gifts for the boy, and words that carried the weight of regret. But every time, Amara met him with calm distance. I don't need your help, she would say, her voice steady but not cruel. We survived without you. Tund nodded, never arguing. He understood that he wasn't there to erase the past, only to face it. One evening, as the sun melted into the horizon, Tund came to their home again. The sound of his footsteps stirred Amara's mother, Mama Ifioma, who sat weaving baskets near the doorway. She looked up and sighed deeply when she saw him. You still come? She asked. Yes, Mama, he replied softly. I only want to make things right. She studied him with eyes that had seen too much sorrow to be easily softened. You can't make right what you turned wrong, boy. You taught my daughter pain, let her teach you forgiveness. Her words cut through the air like truth carried on wind. Tund bowed his head, tears glistening in his eyes. I'm trying, Mama. I swear I am. Inside the hut, Amara listened silently. Her heart no longer ached when she heard his voice. She felt distant, like she had already crossed a river he was still learning to approach. Days turned into weeks. The villagers who once spat her name now greeted her with respect. They saw how she carried herself, not with bitterness but with quiet strength. The same people who once whispered disgrace, now asked her for healing herbs and advice. Even the schoolteacher who had once refused to meet her eyes, stopped by to apologize. Amara didn't need their pity. She had turned shame into survival. Meanwhile, Tund began helping quietly around the community, repairing fences, fetching water for elders, and working in the fields. He never demanded acknowledgement, never spoke of redemption. People noticed his humility, and slowly the gossip about him shifted too. One afternoon, as the market buzzed with laughter, Chike ran up to Tund, his little legs wobbling, his face bright with joy. Uncle Tund, he shouted, holding up a broken toy. Fix it for me. Tund froze. The word uncle hung in the air, innocent, unknowing, pure. He smiled weakly, taking the toy. Of course, little one, he said, kneeling down to mend it. His fingers trembled slightly as he worked, the weight of the unspoken truth pressing heavy on his chest. Amara watched from her stall, a soft expression passing over her face. There was no hatred in her eyes anymore, only quiet acceptance. She walked over slowly. He likes you, she said simply. Tund nodded. He should know who I am, he whispered. She shook her head gently. Not yet. He knows love, and that's enough for now. Her voice carried both mercy and boundary, a balance only someone who had been broken and rebuilt could hold. Tund looked up at her, eyes glistening. Do you hate me, Amara? She paused, then smiled faintly. No, Tund. Hate is heavy. I put it down long ago. For a moment, silence stretched between them, not tense, not bitter, but peaceful, like a wound that had finally stopped bleeding. When he stood to leave, Mama Ifioma's voice carried from the doorway once more. You see, boy? Forgiveness isn't always words. Sometimes it's the space people give you to become better. Tund nodded, his throat tight. And she gave me that, he said softly. As he walked away, Amara lifted her son into her arms. The villagers watched, not with judgment this time but with quiet reverence. They had witnessed something greater than scandal. They had seen grace grow from pain. That night, as rain fell gently on the roof, Amara whispered a prayer of peace, not just for herself but for Tund too. For in her heart, she knew, the reckoning had come and passed, not through vengeance, but through the quiet power of forgiveness. It was the harvest season, the air alive with drums, laughter, and the smell of roasted corn. The entire village gathered in the square to celebrate the year's blessings. Children danced, elders exchanged stories, and the chief gave thanks to the ancestors for rain and renewal. Amara stood among the crowd, her son, Chike, resting against her hip. She had begun to smile again, not the shy smile of a girl, but the calm one of a woman who had weathered storms. Her mother sat nearby, her eyes filled with pride and quiet peace. Then Tund stepped forward. His presence drew murmurs. Some still whispered about his past, others watched curiously. He looked different, leaner, older, stripped of arrogance. In his hands he held no offering of food or wine, only a single carved wooden toy, the same kind he once made for Chaik. He cleared his throat. "My people," he began, his voice trembling. The drums slowed, and the chatter faded until even the wind seemed to hush. "I have come here to confess," he said. "To speak truth where I once sowed lies." A ripple of confusion moved through the crowd. Amara froze, her heart pounding. Tund continued, his eyes fixed on the ground. "2 years ago, I brought shame upon an innocent girl. I made her promises I never intended to keep. And when she carried my child, I denied her, out of fear, out of cowardice." The silence deepened. Women gasped softly, elders exchanged glances. "I watched her suffer," Tund said, voice breaking. "I let you all believe she was at fault. I called her names, while she carried my son and my sin alone. But today I will no longer hide behind silence. That boy," he pointed toward Chaik, whose wide eyes blinked in confusion, "is mine. And his mother, Amara, is the bravest soul I've ever known." Amara's breath caught. She felt the world tilt for a moment, years of buried pain trembling at the edge of release. "I lied," Tund said again, louder this time, his voice echoing off the stone walls. "And I accept whatever judgment the elders give. But I needed the truth to breathe. I needed her to be free of the shame I put on her name." For a heartbeat, the entire village was silent. Then whispers spread like wind through dry grass. Mama Ifioma stood slowly, her posture proud and firm. "The truth has taken long to walk," she said, her voice carrying the authority of both a mother and a survivor, "but it has arrived." Her gaze met Amara's. "You see, my daughter," she whispered, "the earth always brings buried truth to light." Amara's tears fell, but they were no longer heavy. Each one felt like rain on parched soil, cleansing, freeing. The same people who had once pointed at her now looked at her with awe. The shame that had clung to her like dust began to fall away. Elder Joba, the village chief, rose and spoke gravely. "Tund, your confession does not erase your deeds, but truth spoken in the open is the beginning of redemption. You will answer for your wrongs, but today the ancestors see honesty at last." Tund bowed deeply, his shoulders trembling. "I will accept any punishment. But I thank you for listening." Amara stepped forward then, her son still in her arms. For a long moment she simply looked at him. This boy who had broken her spirit once and now stood broken before her. "Tund," she said softly, "truth does not undo pain, but it gives it a place to rest." Her words struck something deep within him. Tears slid down his cheeks. "Can you forgive me?" he asked, voice barely audible. Amara's eyes glistened. "I already did," she said. "Long before you asked." The drums began again, softly at first, not of celebration but of cleansing. Villagers nodded, murmuring blessings under their breath. As Amara walked away with her son, Mama Ifioma took her hand. "You see, child," she said with a smile, "even buried truth finds its way to dawn." And when Amara looked up, she saw the first rays of sunlight cutting through the clouds, warm, golden, and free. Years passed, and the dust of old whispers finally settled into the soil of memory. The little girl who once hid her tears behind mud walls grew into a woman whose voice carried healing. Amara became the midwife of the village, her hands now the same ones that had once trembled in fear, now steady and sure, welcoming new life into the world. Young girls came to her in secret, frightened and uncertain, and she would sit with them by the hearthlight, her voice gentle. "You are not ruined," she would say. "You are rising." Her eyes held the kind of calm that only pain could teach, the kind that turned sorrow into wisdom. The mothers trusted her, the elders respected her, and the children adored her laughter, a sound that had once been silenced by shame but now filled the air with warmth. She built a small hut by the river where she tended herbs, delivered babies, and taught every girl that her worth was not measured by judgment, but by the strength to keep living when the world turned away. Her son, Chaik, grew tall and kind-hearted. He often sat with her during quiet evenings, listening to the hum of crickets and the rustle of palm leaves. One night as the moon rose he asked, "Mama, why do they say you are the bravest woman in the village?" Amara smiled faintly, brushing his hair. "Because I learned to tell the truth even when it hurt." He nodded, not yet understanding fully, but she saw in his eyes the same fire she once carried, a light that refused to bow to darkness. Years later, when Chaik became a man, he stood before the same people who had once whispered his mother's name with disdain. Now they spoke it with honor. He told them, "My mother taught me that silence feeds shame, but truth sets the heart free." Amara watched him from the crowd, her heart swelling. The child born of scorn had become a voice of courage, her living proof that no beginning, however painful, could define one's end. At the edge of the gathering, old Mama Ifioma smiled at Amara. "You see, child," she murmured, "even wounds can grow wings if tended with love." That night, as Amara sat outside her hut, the stars seemed brighter than she remembered. The breeze carried distant laughter, echoes of her younger self, fearless again. She whispered into the wind, "Let no girl hide her tears as I once did. Let her know she is light, even when the world calls her shadow." And the village would remember her words for generations. Mothers told their daughters, midwives told their apprentices, and elders repeated it at every birth. Shame dies when truth is spoken, but silence feeds its fire. It became not just a proverb but a promise, that no voice would be buried again and no girl's story would end in shame, only in strength.